Before the wires were cut, before the neighborhood descended into chaos, Sycamore Ridge looked picture perfect, at least from the outside. Rows of manicured lawns lined the Col D. Sac. Mailboxes matched down to the exact shade of beige the HOA mandated, and every Thursday, the sprinklers turned on at exactly 6 a.m. It was the kind of place built to look calm, controlled, and safe. But control can be the most fragile illusion of all. When the sprinklers stopped working across our entire neighborhood, nobody suspected foul play, until the police station down the street lost power too. That's when we found her, the HOA president, standing beside a tangled mess of fiber lines she'd ordered cut, to teach a lesson about unauthorized connections. Within minutes, the whole community went dark. Phones, cameras, even security systems. But she didn't realize who she'd just crossed. Because I wasn't just a homeowner. I was the systems engineer who built the backup network she couldn't touch. And 4 minutes later, I flipped a switch she'd never forget. What happens when petty power meets real power? My name's Ethan. I moved to Sycamore Ridge 3 years ago, trading the hum of data centers and late night code deployments for something quieter. I wanted peace, a slower life, away from the endless buzzes of government projects and corporate deadlines. I didn't tell anyone what I did for a living. In a place like Sycamore Ridge, that kind of information just draws attention. And I'd had enough of being watched. My house sat at the edge of the community, right before the slope that led to the municipal service road. I liked it that way. Fewer neighbors, fewer rules that mattered. My world was quiet, predictable, and under control, or so I thought. In Sycamore Ridge, control was already spoken for. The HOA wasn't just an organization, it was a small empire. A system built on warnings, fines, and fear. And at the center of it was one woman, Marjorie Calloway. She was the kind of person who turned neighborly smiles into weapons. Pastel sweaters, sharp eyes, and a clipboard that held more power than logic. To her, every mailbox was a test of loyalty. Every slightly crooked lawn ornament was an act of rebellion. For a while, I kept my distance. I paid dues, kept my hedges neat, and stayed invisible. But people like Marjorie don't thrive on peace, they thrive on dominance. The first warning came in the form of a flyer. It showed up in every mailbox, a reminder about unauthorized modifications to community infrastructure. It was vague, cryptic even. But the map printed on it caught my eye. It highlighted the southern section of the neighborhood. My section. The one connected to the police substation's fiber node. I should have said something. Should have warned them not to touch it. But experience had taught me that people like Marjorie don't respond to warnings. They only learn from consequences. So I waited, and I watched. Weeks later, new signs appeared. Community security improvements in progress. New cameras went up at intersections, pointing at driveways and windows. An email followed, announcing a neighborhood connectivity audit. That's when my internet began to flicker. It started with a few seconds of downtime. Nothing unusual. Then came full blackouts, entire systems dropping offline. When I traced the signal logs, I found something I'd never seen before. A manual interference tag. Someone had physically cut the connection. Within hours, I learned the police substation systems had failed too. Dispatch lines, body cam uploads, even emergency communications. Every single one depended on the fiber running under Sycamore Ridge. That's when the truth hit. Marjorie hadn't just tampered with neighborhood lines. She'd taken a pair of scissors to a federal data artery. By the next morning, I received a violation notice. The HOA accused me of unauthorized signal extension. At $150 fine for interference. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so infuriating. They destroyed my connection. And now they were fining me for it. I documented everything. Screenshots, timestamps, even photos of the damaged conduit box sitting a few feet from my fence. Then came the letter taped to my door. Unauthorized equipment removal has been noted on your property. Failure to comply will result in suspension of community privileges. When I tried to enter the gated community that evening, my access card flashed red. Denied. I parked on the shoulder and walked half a mile home, under the glow of security lights. Lights powered by the same grid she'd tampered with. That night, I decided to stop reacting and start preparing. Over the next few days, I mapped the network beneath the neighborhood. I followed the fiber routes the HOA had repurposed for their own cameras and smart gates. What I found was worse than I imagined. They'd spliced into the municipal network without permits. No oversight, no engineering sign-off. Just greed disguised as governance. Marjorie had crossed a line she didn't understand. And now, she dragged the entire community with her. I rerouted my system offline, building a silent backup node linked to the Federal Emergency Communications grid. I didn't touch the HOA's lines. I didn't need to. Because when their network failed again, mine would light up like a lifeline. 2 days later, she held an emergency meeting. I went out of curiosity. The clubhouse was full, tension humming like static. Marjorie stood at the front, clipboard in hand, claiming there had been unauthorized access attempts. She called it a security breach. She called me the problem without ever saying my name. But fear works both ways. While she lectured, I activated the reroute. Silent, seamless, unstoppable. Hours later, when the police substation lost connection again, I watched the chaos unfold from my desk. Officers arrived in the neighborhood, tracing the failure straight to the IA's illegal splice point. And then, just as confusion peaked, I flipped the switch. In 4 minutes, the entire grid was live again. The police station's data flow resumed. Cameras came online, emergency communications were restored, and every system log pointed to one undeniable truth. The HOA had caused the outage. I had fixed it. The fallout was instant. Investigators arrived within hours. They pulled records, permissions, and contractor names. Every document, every authorization trail led back to one person, Marjorie Calloway. Her reign ended not with shouting, but with silence. The board suspended her. The city fined the HOA. And neighbors who once feared her turned their backs. Her pastel cardigans disappeared from the streets. Her clipboard never surfaced again. The federal inquiry didn't arrest her, but it dismantled everything she'd built. Unauthorized network tampering, violation of federal infrastructure protection, permanent disqualification from holding any civic or HOA position. Sycamore Ridge changed overnight. The new board was transparent. They reopened meetings to the public, stopped the random fines, and ended the surveillance program. For the first time, people laughed freely in their driveways. Kids played outside without their parents glancing nervously at cameras. It wasn't perfect, but it was free. A month later, I found an envelope on my porch. No name, no return address. Inside was a single note in neat handwriting. Sometimes we cut what we don't understand. I'm sorry. I folded it once and put it in my desk. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder of what fear does when it's dressed as order. Now, when I walk through Sycamore Ridge, I can still hear the faint hum of the network running under our feet. The same one she tried to control. Power isn't about who enforces the rules. It's about who understands what happens when they're broken. Marjorie learned that the hard way. And me. I learned that the strongest systems aren't made of wires or fiber. They're made of awareness. Of knowing when to stay silent, and when to flip the switch. Because sometimes, the only way to expose control is to let it collapse under its own weight. So tell me, if someone cut the lines that held your world together, would you have the courage to rebuild it your way?